The story of Mystery Incorporated begins not with a single moment, but with a series of chance encounters that would shape the lives of 5 individuals forever. Fred Jones, Daphne Blake, Velma Dinkley, Shaggy Rogers, and Scooby-Doo came together through circumstances that seem almost destined, each bringing their unique talents and personalities to form one of the most enduring detective teams in history. Their friendship would span decades, solving thousands of mysteries across countless locations, always return to the same fundamental truth, that things are rarely what they seem at first glance. Fred Jones was born into a middle-class family with strong values about justice and doing what was right. From his earliest years, Fred showed an unusual interest in how things worked, constantly taking apart household items to understand their mechanisms and then reassembling them, sometimes in improved configurations. His parents encouraged his curiosity, though they occasionally worried about his single-minded focus when he became interested in a particular project or problem. Fred was the kind of child who would spend hours designing elaborate contraptions in his notebooks, sketching pulleys and levers and complex trigger mechanisms that existed only in his imagination. As Fred grew older, his fascination with mechanical systems evolved into a specific obsession with traps. He studied every kind of trap he could find information about, from simple snares used by ancient hunters to elaborate security systems used by modern banks. He understood intuitively how to use physics and psychology together, how to predict where someone would step or reach, how to create mechanisms that would trigger at exactly the right moment. This knowledge was not born from any desire to harm, but from a deep appreciation for elegant problem-solving and the satisfaction of seeing a complex plan work perfectly. Fred's leadership qualities emerged naturally during his school years. He was not the loudest or most charismatic student, but he had a calm confidence that made others trust his judgment. When group projects needed organizing, Fred would quietly take charge, assigning tasks based on each person's strengths and keeping everyone focused on the goal. He did not seek leadership for its own sake, but stepped into it because he genuinely cared about achieving good results and helping his teammates succeed. His appearance was as straightforward as his personality. Fred wore his blonde hair in a simple style and favored practical clothing, most notably the white sweater and blue shirt combination that would become his signature look. The orange ascot he wore was a gift from his father, a small touch of style that Fred appreciated for its classic simplicity. Everything about Fred's presentation suggested reliability and competence, someone you could count on when things got difficult or dangerous. Daphne Blake came from a very different background, born into considerable wealth and privilege. The Blake family had money going back generations, accumulated through successful business ventures and wise investments. Daphne grew up in a mansion with servants and every material comfort imaginable. Her childhood was filled with private tutors, music lessons, dance classes, and all the cultural refinement that wealthy families provided their children. Yet despite these advantages, Daphne never developed the snobbish attitude that sometimes came with such privilege. From an early age, Daphne showed a strong independent streak that worried her parents. She was not content to be merely decorative, to fulfill the traditional expectations of a wealthy young woman destined for high society marriages and charity galas. Daphne wanted to do things herself, to prove her own competence and value beyond her family name and fortune. This drive would shape her involvement with Mystery Incorporated and her evolution from someone who occasionally needed rescuing to someone who could handle herself in any dangerous situation. Daphne's appearance reflected her background and personality. She had striking red hair that she wore long and styled carefully, though practically enough for detective work. Her fashion sense leaned toward purples and greens, colors that suited her complexion and expressed her individual style. She wore fashionable but functional clothing, always managing to look put together even when crawling through abandoned warehouses or running through swamps. Daphne understood that appearance mattered in how people perceived and treated you, and she used this understanding strategically. Her skills developed over time as Mystery Incorporated faced various challenges. Daphne took self-defense classes and learned martial arts, determined never to be a liability to the team. She studied lockpicking and became surprisingly adept at it, her nimble fingers and patience making her better at it than Fred, despite his mechanical knowledge. She learned to drive various vehicles beyond just cars, picking up skills with motorcycles and boats with impressive speed. Daphne transformed herself from someone who might need protection to someone the others could rely on completely. The Blake family fortune meant Daphne had resources the others lacked. She could rent equipment when investigations required specialized tools. She had connections through her family's social network that sometimes proved useful in gaining access to restricted locations or information. Her credit cards never seemed to have limits, allowing the gang to travel extensively and stay in decent accommodations rather than camping or sleeping in the mystery machine constantly. Yet Daphne never flaunted her wealth or made the others feel lesser for having less money. She treated her resources as team resources, available to help solve mysteries and keep everyone safe and comfortable. Velma Dinkley was the intellectual powerhouse of Mystery Incorporated, possessing an intellect that would have qualified her for advanced academic programs and prestigious universities. She came from a middle-class family that valued education above all else, with both parents working as professionals who encouraged Velma's obvious gifts from an early age. They filled their home with books and supported every intellectual interest Velma developed, from astronomy to zoology, watching with pride as her daughter absorbed knowledge at a remarkable rate. Velma's intelligence was not just about memorizing facts, though her memory was indeed photographic and comprehensive. She had a gift for analysis and deduction, for seeing patterns that others missed and making logical leaps that solved mysteries before anyone else realized the clues were even there. Her mind worked like a sophisticated computer, processing information, comparing it against her vast knowledge base, and producing conclusions with impressive accuracy. She could look at a crime scene and notice details that others walked past, her attention to detail being almost supernatural in its precision. Her appearance was practical and unadorned, reflecting her no-nonsense personality. Velma wore her brown hair in a short, simple style that required minimal maintenance. Her signature orange turtleneck and red skirt combination became so associated with her that she seemed to own multiple identical sets, always looking the same regardless of circumstances. The thick frame glasses she wore were essential to her vision, and she had a notorious tendency to lose them at the worst possible moments, leaving her nearly blind and vulnerable until they were recovered. The running situation with Velma's glasses became something of a trademark trait, happening with such frequency that the others learned to watch for it and help her immediately when she lost them. She would fumble around helplessly, squinting and feeling along the ground, while saying her famous phrase about not being able to see without her glasses. The glasses seemed to fly off her face during chases, falls, and surprises with remarkable consistency, as if they were actively trying to inconvenience her at the least opportune times. Velma's contributions to Mystery Incorporated went beyond just solving the mysteries. Though she was undeniably the primary detective brain of the group, she served as a researcher, spending hours in libraries and archives gathering information about the histories of haunted locations and the backgrounds of suspects. She understood scientific principles and could analyze evidence properly, distinguishing between natural phenomena and artificial effects designed to frighten people. Her skepticism about the supernatural was both a strength and occasionally a limitation, as she sometimes dismissed possibilities too quickly in her certainty that rational explanations must exist. Her personality was straightforward and sometimes blunt, Velma not being one for social niceties when they interfered with pursuing truth. She could be dismissive of ideas she considered illogical or unscientific, sometimes hurting feelings without intending to. Yet beneath her intellectual exterior was genuine care for her friends and a strong moral compass that drove her to seek justice. Velma believed deeply that truth mattered, that exposing fraud and deception made the world better, and that using intelligence to help people was the best use of her considerable gifts. Norville Rogers, known to everyone as Shaggy, was perhaps the most unlikely member of Mystery Incorporated, joining the team not from any desire to solve mysteries, but from his unbreakable friendship with Scooby-Doo. Shaggy came from a normal middle-class family. Nothing particularly notable about his background, except for his unusual eating habits and remarkably laid-back personality. He was named Norville after his father, but the nickname Shaggy stuck from childhood due to perpetually messy hair and generally unkempt appearance. Shaggy's defining characteristic was his cowardice, though calling it simple cowardice did not quite capture the nuance of his fear. He was not a coward in the sense of being selfish or abandoning others in danger. Rather, Shaggy had a highly developed sense of self-preservation and a realistic understanding of how easily things could go wrong. He understood that running away from monsters was a sensible response regardless of whether the monsters turned out to be fake. His fear was honest and unhidden, making him more relatable than heroes who never seemed afraid of anything. His appearance was distinctive and suited his personality perfectly. Shaggy was tall and thin, his lanky frame suggesting he had never quite filled out despite eating enormous quantities of food constantly. He wore his sandy blonde hair long and shaggy, the style matching his nickname. His clothing was casual to the point of being sloppy, usually featuring a green shirt and brown pants that looked comfortable but not particularly fashionable. Everything about Shaggy's appearance suggested someone who prioritized comfort and ease over impression or style. The friendship between Shaggy and Scooby-Doo was the emotional heart of Mystery Incorporated, a bond so strong and pure that it transcended the usual relationship between human and pet. They were best friends in the truest sense, understanding each other perfectly and prioritizing each other's well-being above almost everything else. Where Shaggy went, Scooby followed, and vice versa. They shared everything, from food to fears to adventures, their connection so deep that they often seemed to communicate telepathically despite Scooby's limited vocabulary. Shaggy's appetite was legendary and seemingly impossible given his thin frame. He could eat quantities of food that should have been physically impossible for someone his size to consume, somehow metabolizing it all without gaining weight or becoming sick. His favorite foods ran toward the unhealthy, sandwiches stacked impossibly high with every ingredient available, pizzas loaded with every topping, and snacks of all kinds consumed in vast quantities. Yet he never seemed to suffer any ill effects from this diet, maintaining his energy and health despite nutritional choices that would have hospitalized normal people. His role in Mystery Incorporated was complex despite his reluctance to actually participate in mystery solving. Shaggy and Scooby often served as bait, their fearfulness making them perfect for luring out monsters who would chase them through elaborate sequences that allowed the others to set traps or gather evidence. They also frequently stumbled onto crucial clues while trying to find snacks or hide from danger, their wandering leading them to discover things the others would have missed. Shaggy's contributions were accidental but valuable, his very existence as part of the team somehow essential to their success. Scooby-Doo was not an ordinary dog by any measure. He was a Great Dane, a breed known for size and gentle temperament, but Scooby possessed intelligence and personality far beyond typical canine capacity. He could talk, though his speech was limited and heavily accented, words coming out in his distinctive Scooby voice that added extra syllables and sounds. He understood complex conversations and situations, contributing his own observations and opinions to the group's discussions. His cognitive abilities suggested something unique about him, though the origin of these exceptional traits was never fully explained. The circumstances of how Shaggy and Scooby met varied depending on which version of events you accepted, but the core truth remained constant across all tellings. They found each other at a time when both needed a friend, forming an instant connection that would define both their lives. Some stories suggested they met as young child and puppy, growing up together from beginning. Other versions had them meeting later, but regardless of timing, the result was the same, an unbreakable bond that would endure through countless adventures and dangers. Scooby's cowardice matched Shaggy's perfectly, the two of them forming a united front of fear when faced with monsters or danger. Yet, like Shaggy, Scooby's fear did not prevent him from ultimately doing the right thing when it really mattered. He could be brave when his friends needed him, finding courage he did not know he had when Fred, or Velma, or Daphne, or especially Shaggy were in genuine danger. This capacity for bravery despite overwhelming fear made Scooby heroic in ways that natural courage never could be. His physical appearance was that of a typical Great Dane in terms of breed characteristics, though his coloring was distinctive. Scooby's coat was primarily brown with darker brown spots scattered across his body in an irregular pattern. He wore a blue collar with a yellow tag bearing his initials SD, the tag jingling distinctively when he moved. His build was large and somewhat ungainly, his movements often clumsy and cartoon-like, which was appropriate given the animated nature of his existence. The Scooby snacks that motivated both Scooby and Shaggy were mysterious treats with seemingly magical properties. They appeared to be small dog biscuits, but their effect on Scooby and Shaggy was remarkable, providing instant courage and motivation even in the most frightening situations. The offer of Scooby snacks could convince them to do almost anything, overcome any fear, face any monster. The treats seemed to possess no special ingredients, yet their power over Scooby and Shaggy was absolute and reliable. The nature of Scooby snacks raised interesting questions that were never answered. Were they actually special in some way, containing ingredients that affected courage, or merely acting as powerful psychological motivation? Did they taste so extraordinarily good that the promise of them could overcome mortal terror? Or were they simply symbolic, a ritual that Scooby and Shaggy used to convince themselves to be brave? The show never explained their power, leaving it as one of the enduring mysteries of Mystery Incorporated itself. The formation of Mystery Incorporated as a formal group happened gradually rather than through a single founding moment. Fred, Daphne, and Velma knew each other through school, their paths crossing in ways that revealed their complementary skills and compatible personalities. Fred was impressed by Velma's intelligence and Daphne's determination, while both girls appreciated Fred's leadership and planning abilities. They began spending time together, initially just as friends, but gradually developing a shared interest in local mysteries and unexplained events. Shaggy and Scooby joined the group more by accident than design, depending on which origin story you accepted. They either knew Fred from childhood or met the group through some chance encounter that revealed Scooby's unique abilities. Regardless of how it happened, Fred recognized that having Scooby as part of the team would make them unique among detective groups. A talking dog who could investigate scenes from a dog's perspective while understanding human reasoning was an asset no other mystery-solving team possessed. The decision to actively seek out mysteries rather than just stumbling upon them marked the transition from a group of friends to Mystery Incorporated. They realized they worked well together, their different skills covering each other's weaknesses. Fred's trap-making and leadership, Daphne's resources and growing combat skills, Velma's analytical mind, and Shaggy and Scooby's accidental but effective contributions to investigations created a balanced team capable of solving cases that stumped local authorities. The Mystery Machine became their mobile headquarters and symbol, though like much of their history, the exact origin of the van varied in different tellings. In some versions, it belonged to Fred's family, and he customized it for the team's use. In others, the gang purchased it together or it was provided by some benefactor. Regardless of its origins, the van became as much a part of Mystery Incorporated as any of the human or canine members. The Mystery Machine was a panel van, specifically a Chevrolet van from the 1960s in most depictions. Its paint job was what made it truly distinctive and iconic. The van was painted in bright colors, primarily a vibrant green-blue on the body with orange-brown accents. The most recognizable feature was the flower decals that decorated its sides, psychedelic patterns that reflected the era in which Mystery Incorporated first began their adventures. The color scheme and decorations made the van impossible to miss. Hardly ideal for subtle detective work, but perfect for the group style. Inside, the Mystery Machine was part van and part mobile office. The back area had been customized to serve various purposes during investigations. There was space for the gang to ride together, with seating that could accommodate all 5 members reasonably comfortably, though comfort was relative in a van with minimal suspension driving down rough roads to abandoned locations. Storage areas held their equipment, including Fred's trap-building materials, Velma's research materials, and large quantities of food for Shaggy and Scooby. Fred was the primary driver of the Mystery Machine, treating the van with care and maintaining it meticulously despite the abuse it suffered during their adventures. He understood every sound the engine made, every quirk of its handling, and kept it running smoothly through regular maintenance and repairs. The van rarely broke down despite being driven through swamps, deserts, and over terrain that would have destroyed lesser vehicles. Fred's mechanical skills extended to the Mystery Machine itself, allowing him to repair it in the field when problems arose. The van had been modified in various ways over time to better serve the team's needs. Fred had installed better lighting for examining evidence at night. Storage compartments had been added to organize their growing collection of investigation equipment. The suspension had been upgraded to handle rough terrain more effectively. Small additions like a first aid kit, emergency supplies, and tools accumulated over years of experience teaching them what they needed to have available during investigations. The Mystery Machine served psychological purposes beyond mere transportation. Its familiar interior was a safe space where the gang could regroup after frightening encounters, discussing what they had discovered and planning their next moves. The van represented home and security even when they were far from their actual homes, a mobile sanctuary that kept them together and protected. Shaggy and Scooby particularly appreciated the van, often retreating to it when monsters were nearby, treating it as a place of refuge despite its dubious defensive capabilities. The formula that Mystery Incorporated followed in their investigations became remarkably consistent across their many cases. They would arrive in a new location, often a small town or remote facility, where locals reported strange supernatural occurrences. These reports always involved some kind of monster or ghost terrorizing the area, scaring away customers or residents, and generally causing problems that local authorities could not or would not address. The gang would begin investigating, gathering initial information, and getting a sense of the situation. Early in each investigation, they would encounter the monster or ghost themselves, usually in a staged appearance designed to frighten them away from further investigation. This first encounter would send Shaggy and Scooby running in panic, while Fred, Daphne, and Velma remained to observe and gather clues. The monster's appearance and behavior will provide valuable information, revealing both the nature of the disguise and possibly weaknesses or patterns that could be exploited later. Velma would do research, often at local libraries or by talking to longtime residents who knew the area's history. She would uncover relevant information about past events, property disputes, local legends, or other contexts that helped explain the current situation. Her research would reveal possible suspects, people with motives to want the property abandoned or to scare away competition. Velma's findings would typically narrow the possibilities significantly, though proof would still be needed. The gang would split up to cover more ground, a decision Fred made that everyone went along with despite it consistently putting people in danger. The splitting up usually resulted in various subgroups encountering the monster again in different locations, each chase providing more information about the monster's capabilities and limitations. Fred would notice mechanical details about how the monster moved or appeared. Velma would find physical evidence like footprints or materials used in the costume. Daphne would discover secret passages or hidden rooms. Shaggy and Scooby would accidentally stumble onto crucial clues while looking for food or hiding places. Fred would devise an elaborate trap designed specifically to capture the particular monster they were dealing with. He would explain his plan to the group, assigning everyone roles in the trap's execution. The trap always involved complex mechanical elements, timing that had to be precise, and usually required Shaggy and Scooby to act as bait despite their vocal objections. The promise of Scooby's snacks would convince them to participate despite their fear, though they would grumble about it right up until the trap was sprung. The trap would malfunction in some way or catch the wrong person initially, a running pattern that added tension and comedy to the resolution. Fred's traps were ingenious but not infallible. Mechanical failures or unexpected movements by the monster often sending the plan awry. Someone would get caught in the trap instead of the monster, usually Fred himself or sometimes Shaggy and Scooby. The chaos that followed these mishaps often resulted in the monster being caught anyway, though through accident rather than precise planning. The unmasking was a climactic moment of every investigation, the point where supernatural terror was revealed to be mundane fraud. Fred would pull off the mask or costume to reveal a normal human underneath, someone they had encountered earlier in the investigation. The reveal was always someone with a clear motive for the deception, their plan laid bare by the evidence the gang had collected. The guilty party would often explain their scheme in detail, either during the unmasking or in a final scene where the complete truth was laid out for everyone. The motivations behind the disguises fell into predictable categories that repeated across countless investigations. Real estate was perhaps the most common motive. Someone wanted to drive down property values to buy land cheaply or to scare away competition for valuable property. Treasures or valuable resources often provided motivation. Criminals using monster disguises to keep people away from locations where they were stealing or searching for hidden valuables. Revenge sometimes motivated the disguises, people using the monster persona to frighten enemies or get back at those who had wronged them. Simple greed drove many cases, the desire for money or property trumping any concern for fear and disruption their actions caused. The criminals came from all walks of life, reflecting the range of human nature and the universal capacity for deception when motivated by self-interest. Some were respected community members, using their positions of trust to deflect suspicion while carrying out their schemes. Others were outsiders who saw opportunity in local legends and frightened communities. Some were sympathetic figures driven by desperation, while others were simply greedy or cruel, enjoying the fear they caused or indifferent to it as long as their plan succeeded. The local authorities in these cases were often shown to be ineffective or even complicit. Sheriffs and police would dismiss the supernatural reports, unable or unwilling to investigate properly. This ineffectiveness was what created the space for Mystery Incorporated to operate. Teenagers solving cases that should have been handled by professional law enforcement. The gang's success made the local authorities look incompetent by comparison, though they rarely seemed to resent this, usually being grateful for the help despite the implicit criticism of their own abilities. After the unmasking, there would be a denouement where loose ends were tied up and everyone reflected on the case. The gang would explain any remaining confusing details, making sure the full story was clear. The grateful locals would thank them, sometimes offering rewards that the gang politely declined or accepted modestly. Shaggy and Scooby would usually be found eating, having overcome their fear enough to focus on their primary interest. The gang would get back in the mystery machine and drive off toward their next adventure, the cycle complete and ready to begin again. This formula became so well established that it transcended individual episodes or series, defining Scooby-Doo across all its incarnations. Audiences knew what to expect and found comfort in that predictability. The ritual of mystery, investigation, chase, trap, and unmasking providing satisfying structure. The formula worked because it balanced familiar comfort with enough variation in monsters, locations, and specific details to keep things interesting without ever becoming genuinely challenging or frightening. The monsters themselves were often based on local legends or myths, the disguised creators drawing on existing stories that already frightened people. Ghost pirates haunted coastal towns, drawing on pirate legends and stories of buried treasure. Werewolves appeared in rural areas where old superstitions still held sway. Ancient mummies threatened museums and archaeological sites, combining Egyptian mystique with the romance of curses and ancient secrets. Swamp creatures emerged from dark waters in the American South, reflecting regional folklore about monsters in the murky depths. The quality of the disguises varied, but generally reflected remarkable skill and resources for private individuals creating them. The costumes had to be convincing enough to frighten people from a distance, look supernatural enough to maintain the illusion, but also allow the wearer to move and see adequately. Some incorporated sophisticated special effects of the time period, using projected images, smoke effects, or mechanical elements to enhance the supernatural appearance. The cost and effort required for these elaborate disguises raised questions about whether crimes they enable were worth the investment. The chase sequences that punctuated every investigation became iconic and formulaic in their own right. Shaggy and Scooby would run from the monster through corridors, rooms, and buildings in patterns that defied physics and spatial logic. Doors would open and close in impossible sequences. The same hallway would appear multiple times, and characters would emerge from different doors and logic suggested they should. These chase scenes were set to upbeat music, transforming fear into slapstick comedy through the power of editing and impossible geography. During these chases, Shaggy and Scooby would sometimes accidentally get the upper hand through pure chance, their panic flight leading to the monster getting tangled in curtains or falling into pits or otherwise being temporarily inconvenienced. These moments of accidental competence never gave Shaggy and Scooby confidence in their ability to handle the monsters, the next encounter sending them into the same frightened flight, despite previous successes. Their fear reset completely between chase scenes, each new pursuit starting from the same baseline terror. The physical comedy during chases was elaborate and creative, involving sight gags and impossible stunts that took advantage of the animated format. Shaggy and Scooby would run in place before takeoff, their legs spinning like wheels before they shot forward. They would hold up signs with messages when unable to speak due to fear. They would disguise themselves as various objects or people with costume changes that happened instantly off-screen. The chase scenes were playground for animation tricks that would be impossible in live action, adding whimsy to what could have been genuinely frightening pursuit sequences. Food appeared during investigations with surprising frequency. Shaggy and Scooby's appetite never being deterred by danger or frightening circumstances. Abandoned mansions would have fully stocked kitchens that they would raid. Hotels would have room service that they would order in enormous quantities. Even in the middle of chases, they would sometimes stop to grab sandwiches or snacks before continuing to run. Their eating was treated as both character trait and comic relief, the juxtaposition of mortal terror and casual snacking, creating humor from the contrast. The gang's willingness to repeatedly put themselves in danger for strangers reflected an admirable, if somewhat reckless, commitment to justice. They received no pay for their investigations, operating purely from desire to help people and solve mysteries. They risked injury or worse in every case, facing criminals who might react violently if cornered. Yet they never hesitated when someone needed help, never questioned whether a case was worth their time or effort. This selfless dedication made them heroic despite their youth and amateur status. The frequency with which they encountered these costume criminals raised interesting questions about their world that were never addressed directly. Did America have an epidemic of people dressing as monsters to commit fraud? Was something about Mystery Incorporated attracting these cases, their reputation drawing them to places where mysteries occurred? Or were these cases always happening everywhere, and they simply investigated a small fraction of total cases? The sheer number of people willing to dress as monsters and the consistent incompetence of local law enforcement in dealing with them suggested something systematic about their world rather than random chance. The lack of serious consequences for the criminals they caught was notable and sometimes jarring. The gang would turn over the unmasked criminal to local authorities, but we rarely saw trials or significant punishment. The criminals would be led away, presumably to face justice, but the gang moved on too quickly to see resolution. This lack of consequences made the crimes feel less serious, as if dressing as a monster to commit fraud was a minor offense rather than a potentially serious crime, depending on what specifically had been done under cover of the disguise. The relationship dynamics within Mystery Incorporated remained remarkably stable despite the pressures their lifestyle created. Fred, Daphne, and Velma maintained a close friendship that occasionally hinted at romantic tension, particularly between Fred and Daphne. But these tensions rarely developed into explicit relationships. The focus remained on the mysteries and the friendship rather than romance, keeping the dynamics simple and consistent. Shaggy and Scooby's friendship was the one relationship that received consistent emotional focus, their bond being central to the group's identity. Fred's leadership was generally unquestioned. His plans followed even when they seemed questionable. His confidence and competence in most situations earned him this trust, though occasionally his plans would fail spectacularly enough to warrant criticism. He took his role seriously, feeling responsible for the team's safety and success. This sense of responsibility drove him to make his traps as effective as possible, to plan as carefully as he could, and to learn from mistakes when his plans went wrong. Daphne's evolution from someone who often needed rescuing to a capable and dangerous member of the team reflected her determination to prove herself. Early in the gang's history, Daphne had a tendency to get captured or to fall into danger through accidents, earning her a reputation for being danger-prone. She worked hard to change this reputation, developing skills and awareness that made her as capable as Fred or Velma in dangerous situations. This transformation was gradual but significant. Daphne commanding respect through demonstrated competence rather than family money or appearance. Velma's role as the brains of the operation was secure and unchallenged. Her intelligence was so clearly superior that no one questioned her conclusions or analysis. She could be wrong occasionally, misinterpreting evidence or missing details, but her batting average was remarkably high. Velma knew she was the smartest person in most rooms she entered, and carried herself with confidence born from this knowledge. She did not boast about her intelligence, but did not pretend false modesty either, simply stating facts and conclusions as she understood them. The relationship between Velma and Daphne was sisterly, with occasional tensions born from their different backgrounds and approaches. Velma sometimes envied Daphne's resources and social ease, while Daphne sometimes resented Velma's intellectual superiority and tendency to make others feel stupid. Yet they worked together effectively and clearly cared about each other, their friendship weathering the minor irritations that any close relationship accumulates over time. They had each other's backs in dangerous situations, Their personal differences seeming trivial compared to the trust they place in each other during investigations. Shaggy and Scooby's relationship with the rest of the team was more complex. Fred, Daphne, and Velma sometimes showed impatience with Shaggy and Scooby's cowardice and constant eating, viewing them as liabilities or hindrances to efficient investigation. Yet they also recognized that Shaggy and Scooby made essential contributions despite their fear, that their unique perspective and accidental discoveries often cracked cases wide open. The affection between all team members was genuine, creating a family-like dynamic where irritating traits were tolerated because of deeper bonds. The question of what Mystery Incorporated did between cases was rarely explored in detail. They presumably attended school or maintained normal lives somehow, though their constant travel and investigation schedule made regular attendance seem impossible. The show treated their lifestyle as sustainable without addressing the practical difficulties it would create in reality. They had to eat, sleep, maintain the van, and presumably had families and lives beyond mystery solving. But these mundane concerns rarely appeared in stories focused on the investigations themselves. The gang's families appeared occasionally, but were never central to stories. Fred's parents, when shown, were supportive but peripheral. Daphne came from a large family with multiple siblings who made occasional appearances, their wealthy lifestyle providing backdrop but not driving plots. Velma's parents were educators who encouraged her intellectual pursuits but remained in the background. Shaggy's family appeared sometimes, revealing he came from money like Daphne, despite his appearance suggesting otherwise. These family connections grounded the characters in normal life, but were not explored deeply enough to interfere with the mystery-solving focus. The few times Mystery Incorporated faced genuinely supernatural threats, the experience seemed to shake them despite their extensive experience with fake monsters. When actual ghosts or creatures appeared, the expected formula broke down, unmasking, revealing something that could not be explained by human deception. These encounters were rare enough to be special events, breaking the comfortable pattern, and suggesting that the universe contained real mysteries and dangers beyond human fraud and costuming. The Hex Girls, a band that appeared in several adventures, represented one of these brushes with possible genuine supernatural elements. They were presented as a witch rock band whose members might have actual magical abilities, though this was always ambiguous enough that skeptics could dismiss them as having a gimmick. Their music was catchy and their aesthetic was Halloween-friendly, making them memorable recurring characters who blurred the line between natural and supernatural in ways that most cases did not. The encounters with Vincent Van Ghoul, a warlock who recruited the gang to help recapture demons they had accidentally released, pushed furthest into genuine supernatural territory. These adventures involved real demons with actual magical powers, the stakes raised significantly beyond capturing criminals in costume. The tone of these adventures was darker and more intense, reflecting the increased danger of dealing with actual supernatural threats rather than fake ones. The interactions between Scooby and Scrappy-Doo, Scooby's small but fearless nephew, created interesting character dynamics. Scrappy possessed courage that Scooby lacked, rushing toward danger while his uncle ran away from it. This contrast highlighted Scooby's cowardice, while also showing that size and physical capability did not determine bravery. Scrappy's catchphrase of "let me at him" became iconic, representing his aggressive approach to monsters that contrasted sharply with his uncle's philosophy of hiding and running. Scrappy was a polarizing addition to Mystery Incorporated, some fans loving his energy and bravery, while others finding him annoying and unnecessary. His presence changed the dynamics of investigations, adding another voice to the group and shifting the balance slightly. He looked up to his uncle despite their different approaches to danger, and Scooby seemed both protective of Scrappy and occasionally embarrassed by his nephew's fearlessness showing him up. The gang's investigations took them to diverse locations across America and sometimes internationally. They solved mysteries in New Orleans during Mardi Gras, in Hawaii amid volcanic activity, in New England towns with dark histories, in the American Southwest on Native American lands. Each location brought its own flavor and local legends that informed the specific monster or ghost being impersonated. The variety of settings kept investigations fresh, while the underlying formula remained comfortingly consistent. The architecture of haunted locations followed patterns that became familiar across countless cases. Abandoned mansions featured long hallways with portraits whose eyes seemed to follow you, secret passages hidden behind bookcases or fireplaces, and dusty rooms filled with covered furniture. Amusement parks past their prime had creaky roller coasters and fun houses with distorted mirrors and trapdoors. Old theaters contained backstage areas perfect for hiding and dramatic reveals. Each location type had its own atmospheric qualities that enhanced the mystery while providing practical spaces for chases and clue discovery. The weather during investigations often contributed to the spooky atmosphere, with fog, rain, and storms appearing with convenient frequency. Dark and stormy nights were practically mandatory for proper mystery ambience, the lightning illuminating monsters at dramatic moments, while thunder covered the sound of trap mechanisms being set. The pathetic fallacy of weather matching mood was employed consistently, nature itself seeming conspire to make investigations as atmospheric as possible. The locals in these mystery locations fell into recognizable types that repeated across cases. The skeptical sheriff who dismissed supernatural reports until faced with evidence. The elderly local historian who knew all the legends and past events relevant to current mysteries. The suspicious caretaker or groundskeeper who seemed to know more than they initially revealed. The business owner whose livelihood was threatened by the monster's activities. These stock characters provided information in red herrings, their testimonies helping the gang piece together what was really happening. Red herrings appeared in most investigations. False clues or suspicious characters who seemed guilty but ultimately proved innocent. Someone would have opportunity and apparent motive, drawing suspicion until evidence cleared them or pointed elsewhere. These misdirections were rarely very effective at fooling the audience, the true culprit usually being obvious to anyone paying attention to the formula and looking for clear motives. But they served their purpose in the narrative structure, adding complexity and preventing solutions from being too immediately obvious. The clues themselves range from physical evidence like footprints, fabric scraps, or dropped objects to circumstantial evidence like alibis that did not check out or suspicious behavior from particular individuals. Velma excelled at cataloging and connecting these clues, her mind organizing information efficiently and spotting patterns. She would often announce when she had figured out the solution, though she would wait for the trap and unmasking before explaining everything to ensure they had proof and not just theory. The traps Fred designed showcase impressive creativity and engineering knowledge for a teenager. He would construct elaborate Rube Goldberg machines using materials available at investigation sites, turning ordinary locations into complex trap mechanisms. Nets would drop from ceilings, floors would collapse into pits, walls would swing to cage the monster, cages would descend to capture fleeing suspects. The traps required precise timing and coordination, everyone needing to play their part exactly right for success. The materials of these traps seemed to appear conveniently, abandoned locations always containing rope, pulleys, wooden planks, and other construction materials in quantities sufficient for Fred's needs. This convenience was never questioned or explained, the show simply providing Fred with the tools he needed to build whatever trap the plot required. The suspension of disbelief required for this aspect of the show was substantial but rarely broke immersion because everything else was equally stylized and unrealistic. Shaggy and Scooby's role as baiting these traps was essential despite their reluctance. They had to lure the monster to the correct location at the correct time, maintaining the monster's pursuit while not getting caught themselves before reaching the trap. This required them to run at specific speeds, take specific paths, and time their movements precisely despite their terror. That they managed this coordination while genuinely frightened was impressive, suggesting their fear did not impair their physical coordination or ability to follow complex plans under pressure. The malfunctions that plagued Fred's traps varied in nature, but shared the common result of catching the wrong person initially. Fred himself would end up tangled in his own net, or trapped in his own cage with embarrassing frequency. Daphne or Velma might trigger the trap accidentally. While setting it up, Shaggy and Scooby would sometimes get caught despite being on the same team as the trap setters. These mishaps added comedy and tension, the plan seeming to fail before ultimately succeeding through improvisation or accident. The actual capture of the monster, when it finally happened, often occurred through means other than the trap working as designed. The chaos of the malfunctioning trap would lead to someone colliding with the monster, or the monster would trip over trap materials that were scattered during the malfunction, or some other accidental circumstance would result in capture. Fred's elaborate planning would prove less important than pure chance, and confusion as failed traps created. The unmasking moment was always dramatic. The reveal performed with theatrical flair. Fred would grasp the mask and pull it off in one smooth motion, or sometimes the mask would come off during the capture struggle. The face underneath was always someone they had met during the investigation, the pieces clicking into place as Velma explained how they had figured it out. The guilty party would sometimes try to deny their identity initially before giving up when faced with the evidence. The explanations that followed unmaskings revealed the full scope of the criminals' plan and how the gang had deduced the truth. Velma would walk to the logic, pointing out how specific clues had eliminated other suspects and pointed to the guilty party. She would explain how the monster effects were achieved, demystifying the supernatural appearance with technical explanations of costumes, projections, sound effects, and other tricks. The monster would be reduced from terrifying supernatural entity to person in a costume with mechanical assists, the fear dissipating with understanding. The criminals' reactions to being caught varied from angry defiance to resigned acceptance to genuine remorse. Some would curse the meddling kids who had ruined their plans, shaking their fists in impotent rage. Others would calmly accept defeat, even seeming relieved that their deception was over. A few would try to justify their actions, explaining desperate circumstances or past wrongs that motivated their crimes. The variety of reactions humanized the criminals, showing that people in monster suits were still people with emotions and motivations. The phrase meddling kids became iconic, spoken by criminals with such frequency that it became the expected closing line of investigations. The criminals' frustration with being caught by teenagers rather than professional law enforcement was understandable, but also revealed their hubris. They had created elaborate schemes that fooled adults, but had not anticipated that teenagers with a van and a talking dog would prove more thorough investigators than local sheriffs. The aftermath of investigations showed the restored peace and order that Mystery Incorporated brought to each location. The threatened business would reopen safely. The scared residents would return to normal life. The abandoned property would be accessible again. The gang's intervention had real positive impact, their volunteer work genuinely helping communities, even if they received no material compensation for their efforts. The satisfaction of solving the mystery and helping people seemed to be reward enough for them. The gang would sometimes accept small tokens of appreciation like meals or temporary lodging, but substantial rewards were usually declined or not offered. They were not in mystery solving for profit, but for the sake of justice and the intellectual satisfaction of solving puzzles. This purity of motivation made them admirable, their detective work being genuinely altruistic rather than mercenary. They helped because helping was right, not because it paid well. The frequency of their adventures suggested either remarkable bad luck in constantly stumbling upon mysteries or a reputation that drew people to seek their help. Some stories showed them actively seeking mysteries, reading newspapers for reports of strange occurrences, and driving to investigate. Other times, mysteries found them, their travels coincidentally taking them to places where supernatural events were being reported. Either way, they never seemed to lack for cases to solve. The wear and tear on the mystery machine from constant travel and rough roads seemed minimal considering the abuse it suffered. The van maintained its bright paint and iconic appearance despite being driven through mud, sand, snow, and every other challenging terrain. Fred's maintenance kept it running smoothly, the van as reliable as any member of the team. It was as if the van itself was determined to support their mission, refusing to break down at inconvenient moments. The gang's education suffered from their constant travel and investigation schedule, though this was rarely acknowledged. School attendance would be impossible with their lifestyle, yet they seemed to be students in some incarnations of the franchise. The contradiction between being students and being constantly on the road was never resolved, the show preferring to ignore practical concerns about truancy and miseducation in favor of focusing on mysteries. The legal issues that should have arisen from teenagers investigating crimes and capturing criminals were similarly ignored. They were not licensed private investigators or law enforcement. They trespassed on private property regularly during investigations. They occasionally broke things or damaged property while setting traps or during chase scenes. Yet they never faced legal consequences for their actions, local authorities being universally grateful rather than concerned about liability or proper procedure. The physical danger they faced in every investigation was real, despite the criminals usually being unmasking as ordinary people, being chased through dark buildings, falling through trapdoors, encountering criminals who might react violently to being cornered. These were genuine threats that could result in serious injury. The gang accepted these risks casually, treating near-death experiences as routine rather than traumatic. Their resilience and ability to bounce back from frightening encounters without lasting psychological impact suggested either remarkable mental fortitude or the protective unreality of existing in an animated universe. Velma's glasses situation became a running element that viewers could anticipate and enjoy. The frequency with which she lost them in critical moments was high enough to seem intentional, as if the universe conspired to remove her glasses whenever she most needed them. Her helpless fumbling, while nearly blind, created vulnerability and tension in scenes that might otherwise lack them. The relief when she found her glasses, or when someone found them for her, was consistently satisfying, despite the repetitive nature of the gag. The glasses also served as a humanizing element for Velma, a small weakness in someone who was otherwise extremely competent. Her dependence on them for basic vision reminded viewers that intelligence did not eliminate all vulnerabilities, that even the smartest person in the room could be rendered helpless by losing a simple tool. The glasses represented both Velma's need for assistance and the team's willingness to provide it, each member watching for and retrieving her glasses when they went flying. Daphne's danger-prone reputation in early adventures gave way to competence as she proved herself capable of handling threats. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable, Daphne going from someone who often needed rescuing to someone who could rescue herself and others. Her martial arts skills, lockpicking abilities, and general resourcefulness made her an asset rather than a liability. The nickname Danger-Prone Daphne became outdated as she outgrew the tendency to stumble into trouble, though the reputation lingered longer than the reality justified. Her relationship with Fred was characterized by unspoken attraction and mutual respect. They worked together smoothly, understanding each other's thinking and coordinating effectively during investigations. The potential romance between them was never fully consummated in most versions of the franchise, remaining at the level of hints and implications rather than explicit relationship. This restraint kept focus on the mysteries while allowing viewers to project their own interpretations onto the Fred and Daphne dynamic. Fred's obsession with traps went beyond practical utility into something resembling passion or compulsion. He genuinely loved designing and building traps, the creative challenge and mechanical elegance bringing him joy independent of their usefulness in catching criminals. His eyes would light up when explaining trap mechanisms, his enthusiasm about pulleys and trigger systems sometimes making the others exchange glances. Fred's trap obsession was endearing rather than concerning, a quirky hobby that happened to serve their mystery-solving mission. The ascot Fred wore became an iconic part of his image, the orange neckerchief distinguishing him visually and becoming a symbol of his character. Ascots were not common fashion items for American teenagers, making Fred's choice distinctive and slightly old-fashioned. The ascot suggested a certain formality or traditional values, Fred being someone who appreciated classic styles and conventional approaches even while pursuing the unconventional lifestyle of traveling mystery solver. Velma's turtleneck and skirt combination was equally iconic, her consistent wardrobe making her instantly recognizable. The practicality of her clothing choices matched her personality, everything selected for functionality rather than fashion. She was unconcerned with trends or what others thought of her appearance, dressing for comfort and practicality while investigating. This confidence in her own choices and indifference to others' opinions was admirable, Velma being secure enough in herself that external validation was unnecessary. Shaggy's voice and speech patterns were as distinctive as his appearance, his laid-back delivery, and frequent use of slang like, and man marking him as perpetually relaxed despite constant terror. His speech suggested a hippie influence or California surfer culture, the relaxed cadence contrasting amusingly with the content of what he was saying when frightened. Shaggy could describe the most terrifying encounters in the most casual language, the disconnect between tone and content creating a unique comedic effect. Scooby's speech impediment, adding extra letters and sounds of words, made his dialogue distinctive and endearing. He would say Ruby Rack instead of Scooby Snack, Raggy, instead of shaggy, generally adding our sound to beginning of words. This speech pattern was consistent enough to be recognizable, but not so severe that he was incomprehensible. Viewers learned to translate Scooby speak automatically, understanding his meaning despite the unusual pronunciation. The friendship between Scooby and Shaggy was portrayed as completely equal despite the species difference. They made decisions together, argued occasionally like any friends, but always reconciled quickly. Neither was dominant in the relationship, their partnership being genuinely balanced. Scooby was not Shaggy's pet, but his best friend who happened to be a dog, the distinction being important to understanding their dynamic. Shaggy treated Scooby with the respect and consideration he would show any friend, never condescending to him or treating him as lesser for being canine. The food they consumed in vast quantities never seemed to affect their health or energy levels negatively. They could eat enormous sandwiches, multiple pizzas, countless snacks, and remain physically active and capable of running at high speeds during chases. Their metabolism was apparently superhuman, burning calories at rates that defied biology. This unrealistic aspect of their characters was never explained or acknowledged, simply accepted as part of who they were. The specific foods they preferred tended toward American comfort food and junk food. Hamburgers, hot dogs, pizza, sandwiches of all kinds, ice cream, cookies, and snacks formed the bulk of their diet. They showed little interest in healthy eating or balanced nutrition, their choices driven entirely by taste and immediate satisfaction. Yet this poor diet caused no visible problems. Shaggy remaining thin and apparently healthy, while Scooby maintained his energy and physical capabilities. The kitchen raids that occurred during investigations showed impressive scavenging skills and creativity. Shaggy and Scooby could find food in the most unlikely locations, abandoned buildings somehow containing fresh ingredients that they would combine into towering sandwiches. They would stack ingredients with no regard for conventional sandwich construction, creating precarious towers of meat, cheese, vegetables, and condiments that somehow held together long enough to be consumed. The humor in Scooby-Doo operated on multiple levels, appealing to both children and adults through different types of jokes. Physical comedy and slapstick provided laughs for younger viewers, the exaggerated movements and impossible situations being inherently funny. Wordplay and subtle references offered entertainment for older viewers who caught jokes that children might miss. The self-aware elements and formula repetition allowed for meta-humor, the show occasionally acknowledging its own patterns and conventions. The villain's elaborate plans often seemed like more work than the potential reward justified. The cost and effort creating convincing monster costumes, setting up special effects, and maintaining the deception over time would be substantial. Many of the criminals could have achieved their goals through legal means with less effort than their elaborate schemes required. This logical flaw was never addressed, the show accepting that criminals in this universe preferred elaborate supernatural deception over simpler approaches to crime. The supernatural elements they occasionally encountered raised questions about the nature of their universe. If real ghosts and monsters existed, why were the vast majority of cases still fake? Did the real supernatural beings keep to themselves while humans impersonated them? Were certain types of supernatural entities real while others were always fake? The show never provided consistent answers to these questions, the supernatural remaining ambiguous and rare enough that it did not undermine the standard formula. The gang's fame grew as they solved more cases, their reputation spreading across the country. People knew who Mystery Incorporated was and sought them out specifically when supernatural events occurred. This fame never went to their heads, the gang remaining humble and focused on helping people rather than seeking glory or recognition. They were famous reluctantly, their reputation being a side effect of doing good work rather than a goal in itself. The impact on the communities they helped was shown to be lasting and positive. Businesses saved from ruin by their interventions. People able to return homes they had fled, treasures recovered and returned to rightful owners. Mystery Incorporated left each place better than they found it, their presence being genuinely beneficial despite the chaos their investigations sometimes created. The grateful people they helped formed a network of supporters across the country, potential allies if the gang ever needed assistance. The costs associated with their lifestyle were never clearly addressed. Gas in a van, food for 5 people including 2 with enormous appetites, replacement parts when things broke, the trap materials Fred used, all of these expenses would add up quickly. Daphne's well presumably covered many costs, but the show preferred not to discuss money in detail. The gang functioned as if practical concerns about funding were irrelevant, their mission being too important to be limited by financial constraints. The aging of the characters was inconsistent across different iterations of the franchise. In some versions, they remained perpetually young, teenagers forever despite years of stories. In others, they aged and dealt with adult concerns like careers and relationships. The flexibility of their ages allowed the franchise to adapt to different audiences and time periods, the core characters being recognizable regardless of whether they were portrayed as teenagers or adults. The influences on mystery incorporated from earlier detective fiction were apparent in their methods and dynamics. Fred filled the role of the organized detective who brought structure to investigations. Velma was the brilliant analyst whose deductions solved cases. Daphne, Shaggy, and Scooby provided support and occasionally stumbled onto crucial clues. The team structure echoed classic detective stories while adding unique elements like the talking dog and a consistent unmasking formula. The moral lessons embedded in Scooby-Doo stories were generally wholesome and straightforward. Greed was shown to lead to downfall, the criminal schemes always failing eventually. Teamwork and friendship triumphed over individual efforts, the gang succeeding because they worked together effectively. Courage meant facing fear, rather than lacking fear. Shaggy and Scooby being brave despite their terror, rather than because they felt no fear. These lessons were delivered through story and example rather than explicit preaching, making them more effective and less heavy-handed. The environmental messages occasionally present in Scooby-Doo stories reflected growing awareness of ecological concerns. Criminals were sometimes motivated by desire to exploit natural resources or develop pristine areas. The gang would stop these schemes, protecting the environment as a side effect of catching the criminals. These environmental themes were subtle enough not to feel preachy, while still conveying respect for nature and criticism of those who would destroy it for profit. The show's treatment of different cultures and peoples varied in quality across its long history. Early episodes sometimes relied on stereotypes or showed cultures through limited lenses. Later versions made efforts to portray diverse characters and cultures more respectfully and accurately. The evolution reflected changing social awareness and efforts to be more inclusive and thoughtful in representation. Mystery Incorporated's adventures took them to many places, and the show's handling of those places and their peoples improved over time. The legacy of Scooby-Doo extended far beyond the original series, into countless spin-offs, movies, and reimaginings. The basic formula proved endlessly adaptable, working in different time periods, different settings, and with different tones ranging from comedic to serious. The core appeal of mysteries being solved by a group of friends remained constant even as specifics changed. Generations grew up with Scooby-Doo in various forms, the franchise becoming a cultural touchstone that transcended any single iteration. The catchphrases that emerged from Scooby-Doo entered popular culture and remained recognizable decades after they originated. Scooby-Doo, where are you? Became a calling phrase parents use with their children. Roo-Row became shorthand for noticing trouble. Jinkies and Jeepers were associated with Velma and Daphne respectively. Zoinks was Shaggy's expression of fear and surprise. These phrases became linguistic markers that connected people across generations who shared the common experience of watching Scooby-Doo. The theme song was instantly recognizable, its melody and lyrics embedded in cultural memory. The question, Scooby-Doo, where you? Framed each mystery as a search for both the dog and the truth. The upbeat music contrasted with the spooky subject matter, setting a tone that was fun rather than frightening. The theme song prepared viewers for the formula they were about to experience, promising mystery and comedy in equal measure. The animation style of the original series was limited by the technology and budgets of the time, but these limitations became part of the show's charm. The repeating backgrounds during chase scenes, with the same furniture and decorations would loop endlessly, were obvious but became iconic. The character designs were simple but distinctive, each member a mystery incorporated being instantly recognizable even in silhouette. The animation shortcuts and budget limitations gave the show a unique visual style that later, more expensive versions sometimes deliberately echoed for nostalgia's sake. The voice acting brought the characters to life in ways that made them feel real despite their two-dimensional nature. The actors who voiced Fred, Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby created such definitive performances that replacing them was difficult. Their voices became inseparable from the characters, new actors in later versions having to balance honoring the originals while making the roles their own. The voice performances added personality and warmth that made audiences care about animated characters who could have been flat archetypes without skilled voice work. The merchandising that accompanied Scooby-Doo's success helped spread the franchise's reach and cement its place in culture. Toys, lunchboxes, clothing, video games, and countless other products featured Mystery Incorporated. Children could own their own Mystery Machine toys, dress up as their favorite characters, and play at being teenage detectives solving mysteries. This merchandise kept the franchise visible even during periods when new content was not being produced, maintaining awareness across generations. The academic analysis that Scooby-Doo eventually received examined its themes, formulas, and cultural impact from scholarly perspectives. Papers were written about a portrayal of science versus superstition, its use of the detective story formula, its reflection of American anxieties during different time periods. The show that began as simple children's entertainment proved rich enough to support serious analytical attention, revealing depths that casual viewing might not notice. The formulaic nature that some critics identified as a weakness was actually a strength that contributed to the show's enduring appeal. Viewers knew what to expect and found comfort in that predictability. The ritual of mystery, investigation, chase, trap, and unmasking was satisfying in its repetition, each iteration providing the same basic pleasure with enough variation to maintain interest. The formula was not a creative limitation, but a framework that allowed endless variation within consistent structure. The influence of Scooby-Doo on later detective and mystery shows was substantial and long-lasting. The idea of a team of diverse individuals with different skills working together to solve mysteries became a standard template. The focus on unmasking human criminals rather than dealing with genuine supernatural threats influenced the genre's approach to mysteries. The combining of comedy with mystery solving showed that the genres were compatible and could enhance each other. The crossovers that eventually occurred brought Mystery Incorporated into contact with other properties and characters from across media. They met Batman, encountered supernatural heroes, and investigated in universes beyond their own. These crossovers expanded the possibilities of what Scooby-Doo stories could be while respecting the core elements that made the franchise work. The gang could meet anyone and go anywhere while remaining recognizably themselves. The darker reimaginings that appeared in later years showed the franchise's flexibility and willingness to evolve. Mystery Incorporated could work in more serious contexts where the mysteries had real stakes and the character relationships were more complex. These versions maintained the core dynamics while exploring what the characters and their world might look like with more realistic treatment. The willingness to experiment while respecting the source material kept the franchise relevant to new audiences. The nostalgia factor became increasingly important as generations who grew up with Scooby-Doo reached adulthood and had children of their own. Parents introduced their kids to the same show they had loved, creating a shared family experience that connected generations. The nostalgia was not just for the show itself, but for the simpler time it represented, when mysteries had solutions and unmasking revealed truth, when friendship and teamwork could overcome any challenge. The enduring appeal of Scooby-Doo across decades and countless iterations testified to the strength of its core concept and characters. Mystery Incorporated remained beloved because they represented ideals that resonated across time and culture: friendship, courage, intelligence, and the belief that truth could be uncovered through careful investigation. The show suggested that the world was ultimately knowable, that scary things could be explained, that appearances deceive, but careful observation revealed reality. As we drift toward rest, we can appreciate the comfort that Scooby-Doo provides through its reliable formula and consistent characters. Mystery Incorporated will continue solving mysteries somewhere in the endless iterations of their franchise, the gang always ready to investigate strange occurrences and unmask the people responsible. Their adventures continue in reruns and new productions, always available when we want a reassurance of their familiar presence. The Mystery Machine rolls on through animated landscapes, carrying the gang toward their next case. Fred drives confidently, planning traps in his mind. Daphne sits beside him, capable and stylish. Velma reviews her notes, connecting clues and forming theories. Shaggy and Scooby occupy the back, eating snacks and nervously anticipating the dangers ahead. Together they form Mystery Incorporated, ready to face whatever supernatural impersonation awaits them. Sleep now, knowing that mysteries can be solved, that things are rarely what they seem at first glance, that teamwork and friendship can overcome frightening circumstances. Let the gentle rhythm of investigation and discovery carry you into rest, the familiar formula providing comfort as consciousness fades. Tomorrow will bring new mysteries to solve in your own life, but tonight there's only the peaceful knowledge that truth can be found and friends can be trusted. The haunted mansion awaits in the distance, its windows dark and its reputation frightening. But Mystery Incorporated approaches without hesitation, ready to investigate and discover the truth behind the ghost stories. They will split up, search for clues, encounter the monster, run in fear, set a trap, catch the culprit, and unmask the truth. The formula is reliable and satisfying, each step leading inevitably to resolution and restored peace. Good night to Fred and his elaborate traps that almost work. Good night to Daphne and her evolution from danger-prone to danger-ready. Good night to Velma and her lost glasses and brilliant deductions. Good night to Shaggy and Scooby and their friendship that conquers fear through loyalty and Scooby snacks. Good night to the Mystery Machine and all the miles it has traveled in service of justice and truth. Rest comes gently now, the mystery solved and the monsters unmasked. The world is safe again because a group of friends cared enough to investigate and brave enough to face fear together. Let this comfort carry you into sleep, knowing that truth prevails and friendship endures, that mysteries yield to careful investigation, and that things that seem supernatural are usually just people in masks with understandable motivations. The green of the Mystery Machine fades into darkness as consciousness releases its hold. The voices of the gang become distant echoes, their next adventure beginning without us as we drift away. They will solve the mystery successfully as they always do, the formula carrying them through to satisfying conclusion. But for night, we rest in the peace their stories provide. Good night.